Good evening, everyone. This is Heather Turner from District 53, and we are on with one of District 53's monthly educational series for using social media. And we've been kind of running through what's been online so far. The last time we did Facebook pages for clubs, and many people have asked us about Facebook groups. This will probably be a little bit shorter than the Facebook pages ones because there's not quite as much to go over. I'm not going to do it live because there might be some things that we can go live afterwards if people have specific questions, but I'd rather do it this way so people can go back and review it. We are recording this. If you have any questions, please ask them in the question bar to the right, and I will try to address them near the end of the webinar. So Facebook groups are not as commonly used for Facebook clubs as Facebook pages, so club pages, also known as business pages. But it is important to know how to set it up. There are quite a few districts out there that have done groups. Toastmasters International has a huge group online with a lot of participation. And there's several subgroups. There's a pathways related one that is not run by Toastmasters that if you are interested in pathways and have questions and need help, I would highly encourage you to join. And there are also some ones on other topics. Now, club pages, or I'm sorry, groups specifically for clubs, unless you have a very active community and a very active group of people that are in the club, which hopefully is a larger club, that are on Facebook, it's going to be hard for the club itself to get a lot of people posting on it, to have a lot of activity of it. So just be aware of that. It seems kind of like a good idea the first time you set it up, but the major difference between a group and a club page is a club page offers so many more bells and whistles than a group does. Now, to kind of get started, if you do want to create a group, you're going to need to log into Facebook itself, so into your personal account, and then you're going to go into either, there's two ways to get here. There's a link right up here, so there's a little arrow. If you can see my mouse that's circled, create a group. Or you can go up here, and this is a fairly new option that's popped up in Facebook. Apparently not everybody has this option yet, but you can always find it in that little arrow over there. But if you see create, you can also see create a group. Now, this is the first thing you're going to come to when you create a group. So think hard about what you want your group's name to be, and also think about what you have plans for the group. Is it going to be a social group that you're going to try to invite more people into? Is it going to be a group specifically just for club members to discuss things? How are you going to use it, and what are you going to do with it? So you can always rename your group. You need to start by adding some people to it. So if you are friends with some club members or you have their email addresses, make sure they have Facebook accounts. You can add them. I always ask permission before adding people to a group. It's realistically the polite thing to do. People don't like being added to the groups all the time. And I get added to groups that I really don't want to be involved with, or I actually mostly have no interest in. And you can always decline, but it's really proper etiquette to ask people, here's a group that you're interested in. If you're interested in it, feel free to apply yourself. I know people in some groups that I am an administrator in, they'll go in and they'll just add all of their friends to the group. And it's just not really good Facebook etiquette. Now, when you're setting it up for the first time, and you can change this later, think about what you want to do with it and also what you want people to see. So there's all of these different options here. There's a closed group, public group. Closed group is one where anybody can find the group if they're searching in Facebook, but they can't see the content in it. A public group means people can see who's in it and they can see the content in it. And it also shows up whether you're not logged into Facebook or not. And that's important, that you need to let people know if you have a public group and you're inviting club members to post in it, they need to be aware that their personal information and anything they post is viewable to someone that is not logged into Facebook. And I'll touch again on that a little bit later. The closed group is much better for a community group if you are concerned about privacy. It is a little bit different if you're trying to attract people in that may not be familiar with Toastmasters. But again, that's something that you want to discuss with whoever is going to be participating in the group with you. Secret groups are things that you might want to set up. So if you want to have a discussion about a particular thing in Toastmasters, you don't want anybody to find the group, so it's not searchable, nobody can see who's in it, and nobody can actually see anything about it unless they have the specific link to the Facebook page or someone has invited them to that. And again, you can always change these later. Now, this is an example of a test group that I set up. I'm going to be moving in a few months and hopefully starting a new club up in the New Hampshire area. So this is going to be, we're not quite sure whether we're going to name it Kearsarge Area Toastmasters or not, but just as a test run, we wanted to see if there was going to be some people up in that area that might be interested in starting a Toastmasters group. So I started a public group, and we've had a couple of people show some interest in it, which is nice. But that's going to be the first step. And when you've started a group for the first time, this is kind of what you end up, is a completely pretty much blank template to do whatever you want on it. You can upload photos, you can choose photos from wherever. If you've already had photos uploaded into the group itself, you can use one of those too, but you have to make sure they're ones that you as the administrator uploaded. So here's an example of just a simple page or a simple photo that I've uploaded. Now, it's also going to ask you to give a description of this group. So type in what your description is going to be about. This is also going to help because when someone is searching up here in Facebook search, and people don't really use Facebook search like they use Google search, so just keep that in mind. Think about when you're putting text in here, you need to make sure the text strings connect. So if someone puts in here public speaking New Hampshire or public speaking Connecticut, for example, that text string is actually going to be attached in here. It means that the group will show up with more relevance when people search for it. It does have some similarities to Google search. They do constantly change the algorithms in Facebook. So sometimes specific word groupings are searchable and sometimes word groupings that are separated by other words are searchable. It seems to depend on the day of the week when you search in Facebook because they do change things so often. Now, kind of the second step after you've added a description, so as you can see back here, I added a description, you're going to go into the dots up here that says see more, and you're going to have all of these different examples and different settings that you can poke around in. Now, if you're going to start a group for the first time, it's kind of like a Facebook page. You really can't break this. You can't delete the group. If you add other people later to the group and you try to delete it, it will ask you to set another administrator first. If you cannot set another administrator and you kick everybody out of the group, that's the only way you can delete the group at that point. I don't think anybody's actually ever asked me how to delete it, but I figured it would come up at some point, so I'd throw that one in. But the best way to really learn these things online is to do it and just poke around in the back end. They keep adding more things in the groups feature. They added, I think, 3 different things in the last 6 months that they didn't used to have available before. So moderate group settings, pin to shortcuts, and then link to existing group. So if there's another related group, for example, so if you have a district group or a division or area group and you're setting up a club group, for example, you can link it if you are an administrator or a moderator of one of the other groups. Now, this is important because you want to kind of create rules. And I do want to talk about moderators for a minute, because that's important. If you start a group and you have a lot of people in it, it's best practices to have more than one administrator and more than one moderator. And even if you do, especially about pathways, there's a lot of different viewpoints that come up about pathways. Some people don't want change. Some people love pathways and don't want to help. They range the gamut of emotions, especially regarding pathways. So if you get people in discussions, you do need people moderating it. I've noticed in most Toastmasters groups, they're generally quite a bit more polite than some of the other online forums out there, but I have seen some discussions on some Toastmasters forums kind of go into the realm of this isn't quite kosher. And, realistically, when you set your group up, you need to talk about, especially if you have other people moderating the group, and you have to be firm on something. So obviously things like no name calling, but it's hard to moderate. It's hard to administrate a good group and a big group, just because what crosses the line between, hey, that's really not that polite, and you're jumping on somebody. So it's better to actually have a group discussion. I'm the administrator of some of the bigger groups on Facebook, and we actually have our own forums to discuss things. And that's really helpful, because you don't want a moderator just saying, hey, I don't like that discussion by someone. I'm either going to close the topic out, I'm going to delete the topic, or I'm going to kick that person out of the group without discussing it with someone else. Because what I've seen in some forums that I'm a member of but not an administrator of, they're big town forums. So like I live in Enfield, Connecticut right now, and we have a couple of town Enfield forums, and there's only a couple of moderators for the group, and they are constantly getting blamed for being rather heavy-handed about removing posts, about removing people from the forum. But on the other hand, it's their forum, they started it. So where do you draw the line between this is their own thing to moderate as they wish, and who draws the line between what's civil and not civil? So that's, if you do start moderating a group and administrating a group and it does get big, just be warned, you are going to run into this. Just because in the last year or so, I've run into it a lot on a bunch of the different forums. But creating rules of the group is a really good idea. And make sure that you ask people to read those. When they join that forum, make sure, say, direct message them, put a note on when they're a new member. It will show that they're a new member, and say, hey, could you do us a favor? Could you please review the rules of the forum, and just remind them. And if you start seeing people in the forums getting out of hand, feel free to remind them. If you start a group, it is your own group. It's not run by Toastmasters International. Toastmasters International has their own group specifically. So if someone says to you, well, I'm not sure how, or I don't like how you run this, you can say, well, I'm sorry you don't agree with us. If you have a problem with it, go to the Toastmasters International group and complain about whatever you're going to complain about there, or have an issue with it, because that's unfortunately usually the people that end up having discussions about and the moderators need to get together and discuss things. Our people start jumping on each other, and they start getting a little bit aggressive online. So remind people that you have those rules. That can be very helpful. I would recommend, when you start a group, put a first post in. One of the things that is nice about the forums that they just added, I think within the last 6 months, is you do have the ability to schedule posts within the forums. It used to be that the forums, you could only add those and you could only schedule those on pages, but they've added them to the forums. Unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on how you look at it, you can only schedule them I think it's about 3 months ahead. On regular pages, you can schedule them way into next year. So that's just something to be aware of. So if you're putting reminders, for example, of club meetings and club events, you can't quite pre-schedule out as many of them as you used to. If you do want to schedule a post in a Facebook group, it's pretty easy. You're just going to type it in as if you're going to write a regular post, and you're going to see this little clock down here. And when you click on the clock, it's going to bring up a box, and then you can schedule this. Once it is scheduled, it will actually show up to yourself as an administrator and anyone else that is an admin or moderator. That post can then be deleted, or it can be rescheduled, or it can be edited. But the fact that it's been pre-scheduled is only viewable to those people with administrative rights. So a regular forum member won't see, for example, that you have 5 posts scheduled into post. It's just like on a regular Facebook club page. If you're using the pre-scheduling function, those drafts folders and those scheduled posts are not showing up to people looking at the page that are not an administrator. So I hope that makes sense to everybody. Now, in here, if you go to edit group settings, it's going to give you the option to pick a group type. All of these things are changeable. So if you decide that it's going to switch from a club to something else, for example, so switch from a club to events and plans, or social learning, or support, you can always set it and change it whenever you want, but you can only pick one group type. Now, the other part that you should look at is under those dots where it says edit everything, make sure you add tags. These help, again, sort of like your description that you entered earlier. When people are searching in Facebook search, they're going to help people find your group. So make sure you add anything applicable, and you can change those at any time. In here is something that says applications. I would be very, very cautious of attaching anything at this point. A lot of the applications that are letting them attach themselves to groups are also insecure. So what will happen is, because you're an administrator of a group page, it's kind of like letting app application to your personal page. And this is how Facebook accounts get compromised. When you add app access, it basically creates a backdoor into your Facebook personal account. So someone can basically get in, and a lot of these applications, like on a personal page, when you see those contests, for example, trying to think of a good one, what age were you if you were born, 50 years ago, or, what famous artist were you in the 18th century? And you take these quizzes. Those are apps that are allowing access to your account. And unfortunately, if you add an app through a group and you add an insecure one, it can compromise your personal account too. So those are still kind of being under development in terms of the safe ones and the non-safe ones. For the time being, until I know for a fact that any of these applications are secure, I recommend staying away from this. Now, if you're an administrator of a page, so a club page, a division page, an area page, or even the district page, you can link your page back and forth. So an administrator of one can be an administrator of another, and you can use it as the administrator, and I'll touch on that a little bit more in a moment. But what happens is, like, if we have a group for District 53, for example, and we also have a page for District 53, and we've linked those two together. So on the District 53 page, on the left-hand side on the tabs, it'll say group. And when you click on that, it will actually lead to the District 53 group itself. Now, this color, you can choose any one. Web address, that's the same thing. You can customize the address. This is where you can change the privacy back and forth. Manage badges, I really actually haven't seen that used much, at least not on any of the forums that I frequent or I'm the administrator of. So I can't say do this or not do that. You can mess around with the back-end settings of it. There are a couple of different options, but that one is entirely up to you. There's also social learning units. Those are fairly new in terms of you can actually add sort of educational modules. I have not seen, again, a lot of groups doing this yet. It's something that rolled out just, I would say, again, within probably the last 8 months, if I remember correctly. And I don't think people have really utilized the resource as much as it's being meant to, at least, again, not in any of the groups that I'm in yet. So I'm kind of keeping an eye on that. What'll happen if in Facebook groups and Facebook pages, if a utility or an option doesn't get utilized much, what Facebook will do is it'll take it away at some point, because it's sort of like they track this. It's sort of like Facebook used to have lists, which were really great for aggregating content, and they did away with them just because nobody knew about them and nobody used them. So they kind of fed off of each other. Now, this is important, membership approval. So if you do want to control who comes into the group, you want to make it only administrators and moderators of the group, because anybody in the group can just go and add people. So if you just want Toastmasters in the group, for example, or you just want people that you are going to know that are in a regional area, you want the admins and moderators to be the only one that can add. If you do want people to invite friends, for example, that might be interested in joining Toastmasters, that's up to you, anyone in the group. And if you're kind of on the fence about that one, ask the people that you're going to be inviting into the group, do you want to be able to add people to the group yourself? Do you want to add people to invite them yourself? Do you want us to maintain that? It really should be a group discussion. Now, chat permission creations, you do want to make sure that members, moderators, and admins can create chats. Now, membership requests is a good idea. Unfortunately, what I found in some groups, not a lot of Toastmasters groups, but we have found this in a couple of the Toastmasters groups that I am the moderator and administrator of, is, somebody might actually lie on the questions. There might not be Toastmasters, and then they get in the group and they spam it. So you might see this weird ad for, $2.99 sunglasses is, I think, the last one I saw in one of the groups. But kind of weeding out those people that aren't specifically who you're looking for, you can set up to 3 different questions and ask them specific questions. They may not necessarily fill them out at the time, and then if they don't fill them out, you can actually look at the list and say, hey, they haven't filled these out, I'm just going to leave it. At that point, you can direct message them and say, hey, are you interested in this group? You didn't answer the questions. Or you can just leave it. If they really want to get into the group, it won't send them a reminder that they haven't answered the questions, but if they return to the group, it'll still say admission pending, and it'll prompt them to answer the questions. And we do find a lot of people coming back to a group that were interested, and they say, oh, you didn't just let me into the group, I guess I should answer the questions. Membership requests, this is a fairly new option for groups. So if you have administrators of other club pages, for example, or area or division or district pages or any other pages, and they're administrator of an actual business page or club page, they can join as their page, which also means they can post as their page. That one is up to you. I have actually not seen anybody request to join a Toastmasters group from a page yet, but I have seen it in some other forums, and I am seeing it kind of used inappropriately so far, where people are using it to market maybe the wrong way. I don't particularly like that option, especially for Toastmasters groups, because it doesn't tell you who's the administrator. It just says XXX page. So, someone that's an administrator that could have nothing to do with Toastmasters, that maybe wants to do something odd in your group or stalk your group or whatever, it kind of makes them hide behind the page itself. So I would recommend at least don't allow pages to join as group members. Because that's such a new option, I don't know where that's going to go and if it ever impact Toastmasters groups or not, but this is just something to be aware of. Posting permissions, you do want anyone in the group. Post approval, I do get a question about this. I make sure this is not checked, because what I found, similar to having a page, so you have a club page, you can have it set that you need to approve anybody posting. The whole point of social media is social, so that if you're making people wait for approval before you post something, that's kind of against the way the whole thing kind of is supposed to wrap up. Story post approval, that's another one I would let just stay unchecked, because you do want people to post, you want people to interact online with each other. So this is an example of asking pending members questions. Generally, it depends on where you want to go with your group. Are you using it for your club or upper echelon in Toastmasters in levels, or are you using it to try to attract people into Toastmasters itself? So, hopefully people will start answering these questions, and if they're not, change them. Once those questions are set, you can always change that. Okay, now this is a kind of an example of who has answered the questions, because when you're logged in as an administrator or moderator, it will say to you as the administrator, you have X number of people waiting for approval to join the group. So you can actually go to that, you can click on that link, and it'll tell you, for example, if they've answered the questions, or in some of them, or hasn't answered questions yet, waiting for a response. Now, one of the things you can kind of weed out, if you don't mind if other Toastmasters join your group, if they're a member of Toastmasters International website, if they're a member of the Pathways group, if they're a member of a district group, for example, that you're also a member of, it will tell you something like this: one group in common. In this particular case, the group that I'm an administrator of is a Toastmasters group, and this one group in common is the Toastmasters International page. So I actually know that this person is a Toastmaster, because they're very strict. When you join the Toastmasters International group, they actually ask you for your member number and they verify it before they let you into the group. You know, from the perspective of the club level, asking people for members numbers, we can't necessarily verify those, but because they've actually already gotten into the international group, I know that they're a Toastmaster. So this is an example of our Toastmasters District 53 not website, our club page. And what I had mentioned earlier is, as you can see, that link, because we've connected them with them, shows up here as a group. Now, because I'm an administrator of both the Facebook group and the Facebook page, I can interact with my group as either myself or District 53 Toastmasters page. So it does come in handy, because if you're posting something into a group and you want it to be appearing to come from the group as a whole, for example, you want it to be coming from your club page, you can select this as an option and it will post as that page itself. Now, the other thing to keep in mind is anytime somebody posts in the forum, as an administrator and moderator, you have an awful lot of options of what you can do to the post itself. You might find that someone has reported the post or given feedback about a post, because if you have an active group, for example, with a lot of people posting in it, you might have post something that's off topic, that's maybe inappropriate, that's salesy, that's spam, and someone might report it. At that point, you can kind of eyeball it, because it's hard to, when you have a lot of people posting in groups, try to stay on top of every post and every thread. So those are kind of mini posts underneath the main one, because there's discussion in groups that go on literally for hundreds and hundreds of posts that are kind of nested within that one post. So you can do all these options: editing, deleting, muting. What muting does is it basically shuts them off for posting for about a week. That can be very, very handy if you don't want to remove someone from a forum and you kind of want to have a private conversation with them by direct message and say, hey, this isn't working out. You know, you're being too aggressive, you're not being appropriate for whatever reason, but you don't want to remove them because, say, they're a valuable member and they do give, you know, practical insight. They do help people out. Maybe they're just having a really bad day at the time. So you do have these different options of putting things in there. Now, the other thing you can do too is not just the main post, but the comments. You do have the ability to delete comments and hide comments, and also delete comments and remove a member. Now, this isn't necessarily as important on a group as it is on a page, because you're not going to really have what's called on the pages part trolls. So somebody came along and posted something that was not nice or inappropriate, that obviously wasn't a Toastmaster, they're just being a troll. You don't generally get that on the groups, but if you do have something where someone has made a comment that maybe is off for whatever reason, you can hide it. When you hide a comment, this is a little bit different. When you delete a comment, that person basically knows that you've deleted it because it's not there anymore. When you've hidden a comment, that comment is still viewable to themselves and to anybody that they're connected with that are members of the group, but it's not visible to anybody else. This can come in handy if you have someone that's basically needling someone else, or just maybe has comments that are just not quite right. If you do have a lot of them, you know, keep it in mind, those will show up to you that you've hidden something. So you might want to just keep track of that and say, hey, you know, I've hidden a whole bunch of this person's post. That's potentially an issue. Okay, now I'm going to show you the 3 different things. If you have a private group, for example, so a private or an unlisted group, you cannot get to the link of the group. This is what will show up when you are logged out of Facebook. So if you took the link for the group and you pasted it into your browser bar, you will come to, you must log into Facebook to continue. This is a private group, but not a secret group. So the last one actually was a secret group. This is a private group, which means that you can see what it is, you can't see anything that's in it though. So you can't see the content, you can't see the members, you can't see any of the discussions. This is a public group, and I couldn't find any Toastmasters groups that actually were public without way more time searching around than I had to do this. But I did find a couple that were public, and public group means everything is viewable even if you are not logged in Facebook. You can't comment, you can't like something, but if you do set up a public group, this is something that you do need to make members that are participating aware of this, because their names are going to show up. Anything they post is going to show up outside of Facebook to people looking at it. And I know that people have brought that up as a privacy concern, so that's something to be aware of. Now, this is the Pathways discussion forum. This is not a part of Toastmasters International. This is a support group, but I wanted to show you what it looks like from the administrator standpoint. So we have currently, and this is a little bit, I think, older screenshot, 31 people wanting to join this group. There's also a mentorship match program in here. That's something that is available for some groups and some pages, depending on what selection you set it up as initially. So if you think back a few slides, it'll ask you, what do you want to set the group up as, a support, as a club, all these different options. In some of those options, you do have that ability to set up a mentorship program. If anybody's interested, that's actually a whole kind of different topic for a webinar that I'm not going to touch on right now, because it can be relevant, but it can also off track us quite a ways in a different direction. But this will only show up to administrators and moderators. Nobody else is going to see this. Now, this is the official Toastmasters International group. This is a closed group. This is something I do recommend people join. There's not as many moderators by far as there are on the Pathways group. I know that they have been trying to add more of them. What I would recommend is, it's up to you whether you want to participate or not. What I do recommend, though, is everybody should join this group and use the search feature in here. There has been many discussions that are super valuable, and unless you search specifically for them, you could spend hours just scrolling down trying to find something. But if you're looking for something about club contest judges, for example, or membership packets, use the search this group function first, and there's a whole lot of content in there already before posting for the first time. Hey, I'm hi everybody, I'm here, I've got a question about this. Because on this forum, unfortunately, sometimes there will be people that say, hey, we've already posted about this a whole bunch of times. So this is a great resource, but I would just recommend going in, searching for it first. And if you don't find something, I find the best way to actually ask a question in here is say, hey guys, I've searched for this already, couldn't find it. If anybody has a link to a discussion thread that you've seen in here, appreciate it. If not, here's my question. You kind of have to, because there's so many members from all over the world around here, just be cognizant of there's different cultures, there's different viewpoints, there's a whole bunch of different dynamics that go into this group. And so this is actually a public group that I found that is a club group, and it's one of the few groups that I found for a club that's really active. And I've been having so much fun poking around on this group's page. They set it up as public, so if they wanted to attract more members into it outside of Facebook, for example, this is great for that. But they're posting consistently. They're doing some live video, which is really neat. They have their club information in here, or their meeting time, which is a fantastic idea if you do want to have a public group and use it from a marketing perspective. Just be cognizant of the fact that even though people can see the group, see what's happening in the group, see the posts in that, unless they join Facebook itself and then join the group, they cannot interact with it. So here's an example of, so they've been doing some live video, which is really neat, and I'm having such a great time seeing stuff like that. There is an Easy Speak Toastmasters community group. I have not yet seen one for Free Toast hosts, but I'm not surprised that there won't be one popping up occasionally. If you're going to start a group and you don't necessarily want to start a club one, but you want to start a community group, so where you want to talk about, I want to start a Toastmasters group that maybe we just want to talk about business topics, for example. Don't be locked into the fact that you have to create a group for your club. If you have a particular topic that you're passionate about that's Toastmasters related, look to see whether there's a group in there first that meets the topic that you're looking for. And if not, go ahead and start one. Whether you're going to have a lot of participation in it or not, that I don't know, because we don't know the topics before they've been started. But I tend to think that there's probably some specific topics that haven't been covered, for example. I mean, I personally would love to see a Toastmasters community group that's based on, hey, we just want to give instructional talks at Toastmasters clubs, or I just want to give business related topics, or we just want to talk about food, for example. So there's so many specific ones that you could create a group around if you didn't want to create specifically a club page. So there's also the Toastmasters mentoring program, which is a really great community group to get involved with. A lot of really, really good information is shared in there. That's one of the ones, if you do have time to join a couple of extra groups, those would be the 3 that I would recommend joining, is the Toastmasters International main one, the Pathways group, and the Toastmasters mentoring program. Really great information shared by Philip. He is so generous with his time and his information. Okay, and that's pretty much kind of the back end of it. Like I said, it's a bit shorter than talking about Facebook pages because it doesn't have quite as many bells and whistles. But does anybody have any questions that I can help answer? Okay, and I did have a question in here. Can I please send the link for these sessions to someone? And I would be happy to do that. Carl, if you could do me a favor, I think I have her email, but if you could put it in there, that would be much appreciated. Okay, and the next question is, do we have the other versions of previous webinars recorded? We actually do have all of them except for Free Toast Host 2. We had a recording glitch at it, and I have not unfortunately had time to re-record that particular session, but all of the other previously recorded webinars that we have done for District 53 are located on the District 53 website. Okay, and the next question is, what do you suggest adding people as either moderators or administrators? That's a really good question. Moderators basically, that's what they do, is they moderate the group. The administrators have full access to all the bells and whistles, which really aren't that much, but quite a few of the back end of it. So I would make sure that, if you're having an active group with an awful lot of people in it, have a couple of people that are admins of it, and do have some additional people that are moderators. I do recommend, just like having club pages, have a few people that are administrators with full access to it. Because just like with the groups, I'm in a couple of Toastmasters groups where the administrators have actually passed away and nobody can add additional people to it. So if you were a moderator before, you're stuck forever as a moderator until you leave. But they can't add additional people to the group to administrate the group, and nothing in the back end can be edited. So you want to make sure, if whoever is the admin of a group, someone else, or at least hopefully a couple of other people, have full access to that. Having multiple moderators really does help when you get to the discussion standpoint, just because it is hard. What seems harsh to someone or maybe rude to someone may not seem like that to the group. It's a very tough nut to juggle for people, because if you're too overbearing, like I had mentioned in the Enfield community groups that I mentioned earlier, you're seen as being a real hard nose. But where do you draw that line realistically? That's something that you need to discuss with yourselves, and also discuss with the people that are going to be in the group itself. Okay, now, if anyone has any additional questions, when you registered for this webinar, you did get a confirmation. If you have questions after the fact that you think of, please feel free to email that email address, because that will come to me and I would be happy to answer any questions that you have after the fact. If there isn't anything that I covered before we go off, and hopefully if you haven't eaten dinner yet like myself, you will be able to do so and have a great evening after that. So I think, thank you everybody, and thank you for attending this. And we do have an upcoming webinar coming up, And we do have, let's see, I believe LinkedIn groups and Twitter still to go over, and blogging. Those additional registration links are also available on the District 53 website. So thank you, everybody, and have a fantastic evening and a terrific weekend.